There exists a hidden magnetism in the human psyche, a force so subtle yet so powerful that it shapes our deepest relationships without our conscious awareness. You who have found yourself repeatedly drawn to those who drain your energy, who promise love but deliver manipulation, who see you not as a person but as a source of supply, you are not cursed, nor are you naive. You are caught in an archetypal pattern as old as consciousness itself. But before we descend into the depths of this mystery, let me ask you something that may disturb your comfortable assumptions. What if your attraction to narcissists is not an accident? What if it serves a purpose you have never dared to examine? What if the very wound that makes you vulnerable is also the key to your liberation? Tonight we venture into territory that most psychology refuses to explore. We go beyond the surface explanations of childhood trauma and attachment styles, though these matter. We go beyond the clinical definitions and diagnostic criteria, though these have their place. We descend into the realm of the collective unconscious, where archetypes wage their eternal wars and where your personal history intersects with the deepest patterns of human experience. The narcissist you keep attracting is not merely a person with a personality disorder. They are a living symbol, a manifestation of forces that have been constellated within your psyche since birth, and you, dear soul, are not simply a victim of their manipulation. You are an active participant in a psychological drama that unfolds according to laws far older than modern therapeutic understanding. When I speak of narcissism, I do not speak merely of vanity or self-obsession. These are surface manifestations of something far more profound. The narcissist carries within them the shadow of the wounded king, the false prophet, the devouring mother or father who consumes rather than nurtures. They are archetypal figures who have lost connection to their own soul and therefore must feed on the souls of others. But here lies the paradox that will shake you to your core. The narcissist can only feed on what is offered. They are psychic vampires, yes, but vampires require invitation. They cannot enter the house of your psyche unless you open the door. And that door, my friend, was opened long ago by patterns you inherited, wounds you carry, and parts of yourself you have disowned. You see, the unconscious operates according to the law of compensation. Where there is extreme light, it calls forth extreme darkness. Where there is excessive giving, it attracts excessive taking. Where there is self-sacrifice, it magnetizes self-absorption. The narcissist appears in your life not as punishment, but as the shadow completion of your own unbalanced psyche. Consider this. Every empath who repeatedly attracts narcissists carries within them their own narcissistic wound. Every giver who finds themselves drained by takers harbors their own capacity for selfishness that they have never acknowledged. Every person who loses themselves in relationships with those who cannot love carries within them the very inability to love themselves that they project onto others. This is not blame, this is recognition. The narcissist in your life is a mirror, reflecting back to you the parts of yourself you have refused to see. They show you your own hunger for validation, your own need to be special, your own capacity for manipulation, all the things you have buried beneath layers of niceness and self-sacrifice. But why do some souls attract this particular mirror while others do not? The answer lies in the constellation of archetypes that were activated in your earliest years. Perhaps you were the child who learned that love was conditional, that your worth depended on your ability to please others. Perhaps you were raised by a parent who themselves carried the narcissistic wound, who saw you not as a separate being, but as an extension of their own needs. In such an environment, the child learns a terrible alchemy. They discover that by abandoning themselves, they can sometimes receive the attention they crave. They learn to read the moods of others with supernatural accuracy, to anticipate needs before they are spoken, to sacrifice their own truth for the promise of love. This is the birth of what I call the wounded healer complex, the archetypal pattern that will haunt them throughout their relational life. The wounded healer believes that their purpose is to save others, to heal the broken, to love the unlovable back to wholeness. This is a noble calling when it arises from strength and choice. But when it emerges from wound and compulsion, it becomes a trap. The wounded healer becomes addicted to being needed, to being the one who understands, the one who stays when others leave. And the narcissist, with their unconscious genius for finding sources of supply, recognizes this pattern immediately. They see the wounded healer approaching and know instinctively that here is someone who will not leave, who will absorb their projections, who will take responsibility for their emotional regulation. The narcissist does not consciously plan this. They are driven by archetypal forces as unconscious as those that drive their prey. This creates what I call the shadow marriage, a union not of two whole people choosing each other, but of two half people unconsciously completing each other's neurosis. The wounded healer provides the narcissist with endless supply, while the narcissist provides the wounded healer with endless opportunities to prove their worth through suffering. But here is where the story becomes both darker and more hopeful. The shadow marriage, though destructive, serves a purpose in the economy of the soul. It brings to consciousness patterns that would otherwise remain hidden. It forces the wounded healer to confront their own shadow, their own capacity for manipulation, their own narcissistic needs. It creates a crisis that can either destroy or transform. Most people, when they recognize this pattern, make the mistake of trying to escape it through willpower alone. They read books about narcissism, they learn to identify red flags, they promise themselves they will choose differently next time. But the unconscious does not respond to conscious decisions. It responds to the deeper work of integration, to the willingness to face what lies beneath the pattern. To break the cycle of attracting narcissists, you must first acknowledge the narcissist within yourself. You must face the parts of you that use giving as a form of control, that need to be needed, that fear abandonment so deeply that you will betray yourself to avoid it. You must recognize that your sensitivity, your empathy, your ability to see the wounded child in others, these gifts have been contaminated by your own unhealed wounds. This recognition is not comfortable. It shatters the image of yourself as the innocent victim, the pure-hearted giver, the one who loves unconditionally. It reveals that your love has conditions too, the condition that you remain indispensable, that you are seen as good, that you are never abandoned. When these conditions are threatened, your own narcissistic rage emerges, though you may disguise it as hurt or disappointment. The narcissist in your life is not your enemy, they are your teacher. They show you what happens when the need for validation becomes the organizing principle of a life. They demonstrate the end result of a soul that has lost connection to its own worth. They mirror back to you your own desperate hunger for recognition, your own fear of being ordinary, your own terror of being alone. But this teaching comes at a cost. The narcissist, in their unconscious wisdom, will push you to the very edge of your capacity for self-betrayal. They will demand that you give until you have nothing left, that you understand until you lose yourself in their reality, that you love until love becomes indistinguishable from suffering. They will not stop until you either collapse completely or find the strength to say no. And here lies the gift hidden within the curse. The narcissist forces you to find your boundaries. They push you until you must choose between self-preservation and self-sacrifice. They create a crisis that demands you either claim your own worth or lose yourself entirely. In this way, they serve as unwitting agents of individuation, though they would recoil from this description. The path forward is not to hate the narcissist or to see them as evil. Evil is too simple a concept for the complexity of the human psyche. The narcissist is wounded, just as you are wounded. They are caught in their own archetypal pattern, just as you are caught in yours. But your healing does not require their participation. Your transformation does not depend on their change. What is required is a descent into your own underworld, a willingness to face the shadow aspects of your own psyche. You must ask yourself the uncomfortable questions. Where do I use my pain to control others? Where do I give in order to receive? Where do I sacrifice myself not out of love but out of fear? Where do I enable others' dysfunction because their dependence on me feeds my own sense of worth? These questions will lead you into the dark forest of your own unconscious, where you will encounter aspects of yourself you have spent a lifetime avoiding. You will meet your own capacity for cruelty, your own selfishness, your own need to be superior. You will discover that the very qualities you despise in the narcissist exist within you, though perhaps in different forms. This encounter with your shadow is not meant to destroy you, but to complete you. For it is only when you can acknowledge your own darkness that you can truly choose the light. It is only when you can own your own narcissistic tendencies that you can stop projecting them onto others. It is only when you can love the rejected parts of yourself that you can stop seeking that love from those who cannot give it. The narcissist will continue to appear in your life until you have learned what they have come to teach. They will take different forms, lovers, friends, bosses, family members, but they will carry the same essential energy. They will continue to mirror back to you your own unhealed wounds until you are ready to do the work of healing them yourself. But once you begin this work, something remarkable happens. The narcissist begins to lose their power over you. Their manipulations become transparent. Their love bombing feels hollow. Their rage no longer sends you into a spiral of self-doubt. You begin to see them not as powerful predators, but as wounded souls acting out their own unconscious patterns. This is not the end of the story, but rather the beginning of a new chapter, for when you are no longer unconsciously magnetizing narcissists, you must learn to navigate relationships from a place of wholeness rather than wound. You must discover what it means to love from strength rather than need, to give from abundance rather than emptiness, to choose partners who complement your fullness rather than complete your emptiness. This transformation is not a destination, but a lifelong process of becoming conscious. You will still feel the pull of old patterns, still hear the siren song of those who promise to fill your emptiness if only you will empty yourself for them. But now you possess something you did not have before, the ability to pause, to breathe, to ask yourself what is truly happening beneath the surface of attraction. The unconscious, you see, does not abandon its patterns easily. It will test your newfound awareness, presenting you with narcissists wrapped in more sophisticated packaging. They will speak the language of spirituality, of healing, of consciousness itself. They will mirror back to you your own awakening words, your own insights, your own journey toward wholeness. But something will feel off, something will ring hollow, and if you have done the work, you will recognize the familiar energy beneath the new mask. This is where discernment becomes your greatest ally. Not the harsh discernment of judgment, but the gentle discernment of wisdom. You learn to feel into the quality of someone's presence, to sense whether they meet you as a whole person or as a projection of their own needs. You discover that true intimacy requires two people who can stand alone, who choose each other not from desperation, but from joy. But let me warn you of a trap that awaits those who have begun to see through the narcissistic dance. There is a temptation to become the reformed addict who now preaches to others about the dangers of the substance they once craved. There is a seductive pride in being the one who can spot narcissists, who can warn others about the patterns they themselves have escaped. This too is a form of narcissism, a subtle way of maintaining superiority through your own wounds. The truly integrated person does not need to be the expert on narcissism. They do not need to educate others about red flags or share their story as a cautionary tale. They simply live from their truth, love from their wholeness, and trust that their very being will attract those who can meet them there. They understand that everyone is on their own journey, that some souls need to learn through the very patterns they themselves have transcended. There is a dream that comes to many who are healing from narcissistic entanglement. In this dream, they stand before a house they once lived in, a house that held great pain and great learning. The house is empty now, its windows dark, its doors closed. They feel no need to enter, no desire to relive what once was. They simply acknowledge what the house taught them and walk away, knowing they carry its lessons in their bones but no longer need to live within its walls. This dream marks a profound shift in the psyche. The narcissist who once loomed so large in your inner world begins to shrink to human size. They become not the powerful figure who controlled your reality, but simply another wounded soul walking their own path. You may feel compassion for them, but it is the compassion of distance, not entanglement. You may understand their pain, but you no longer feel responsible for healing it. In this space of freedom, you discover something remarkable. You begin to attract different people entirely, not because you have changed your location or your social circle, but because you have changed your vibration. The energy you emit is no longer that of the wounded healer seeking someone to save, but of the whole person open to authentic connection. The narcissist, with their uncanny ability to sense supply, simply passes by. You are no longer what they seek, but what do you seek now? This is the question that haunts many who have broken free from narcissistic patterns. For so long, your identity was built around being the one who gives, who understands, who endures. Without someone to save, who are you? Without drama to navigate, what gives your life meaning? Without the familiar chaos of narcissistic love, what does healthy love even feel like? These questions can only be answered through lived experience, through the slow and patient work of discovering who you are when you are not in reaction to someone else's dysfunction. You must learn to be alone with yourself without immediately seeking someone to fill the space. You must discover what brings you joy that has nothing to do with being needed by another. You must explore the parts of yourself that were put on hold while you were managing someone else's reality. This is perhaps the most challenging part of the journey, for it requires you to face the emptiness that the narcissistic relationship was designed to avoid. You must sit with the silence, the uncertainty, the ordinariness of a life not organized around crisis. You must learn to love yourself not because you are special or gifted or wounded in interesting ways, but simply because you exist. The narcissist served a function in your psyche, filling a void that you were afraid to examine. Now that void must be explored, not filled. You must descend into the emptiness and discover what lives there. Often what you find is not the terrible nothingness you feared, but a vast space of possibility, a creative void pregnant with potential. Here, in this space between your old patterns and your new life, you encounter what Jung called the transcendent function. This is the capacity of the psyche to create something new from the tension between opposites. Your experience with narcissists has taught you about the shadow side of love, about the ways connection can become consumption. Now you must learn to love with your eyes open, to give with your boundaries intact, to receive without losing yourself. This new form of love is not as dramatic as what you once knew. It lacks the intensity of trauma bonding, the addictive quality of intermittent reinforcement, the desperate sweetness of making up after conflict. Healthy love can feel almost boring to someone whose nervous system has been trained to interpret chaos as passion. You must learn to find excitement in stability, intensity in presence, passion in peace. The narcissist taught you about power through their misuse of it. They showed you how influence can become manipulation, how charisma can mask emptiness, how the ability to affect others can become the ability to infect them. Now you must learn to wield your own power consciously, to use your gifts to heal rather than enable, to lead rather than follow, to create rather than react. For you are not powerless, despite what the narcissistic relationship taught you. You are not a victim, despite the very real harm you endured. You are not broken, despite the ways you were made to feel inadequate. You are a soul in the process of remembering its own worth, of reclaiming its own authority, of choosing its own path. The narcissist will continue to exist in the world, will continue to seek supply from those who are willing to provide it, but they will no longer be your teacher, your mirror, your tormentor. They will simply be another person walking their own path, dealing with their own wounds, seeking their own healing in whatever way they can. You may encounter them in your life, but you will not be enchanted by them. You will see them clearly, perhaps with sadness, perhaps with compassion, but without the old compulsion to save them from themselves. This is the gift that emerges from the ashes of narcissistic entanglement. The ability to love without losing yourself, to give without emptying yourself, to receive without owing yourself. You discover that you are not responsible for others' happiness, others' healing, others' choices. You are responsible only for your own integrity, your own growth, your own authentic expression. And in claiming this responsibility, you become truly free. Not free from relationship, but free within relationship. Not free from love, but free to love consciously. Not free from pain, but free to feel pain without being destroyed by it. This is the individuation that the narcissist, in their unconscious wisdom, was calling you toward. This is the wholeness that their very brokenness was designed to reveal. The pattern that brought you together was not mistake but fate, not accident but archetypal necessity. You needed to learn what they had to teach, even if the teaching came wrapped in suffering. But now the lesson is complete, the pattern is conscious, the cycle is broken. You are free to write a new story, to create new patterns, to attract new teachers who will guide you toward even greater wholeness. This is not the end of your journey, but the beginning of a new chapter, one written not from wound, but from wisdom, not from need, but from choice, not from fear, but from love. The narcissist has served their purpose in your story. Now it is time to discover what comes next. The unconscious mind operates according to principles far more ancient than our modern understanding of psychology. It does not recognize the boundaries we have constructed between self and other, between inner and outer reality. When you consistently attract narcissists, you are witnessing the operation of what Jung called synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that reveal the hidden connections between psyche and world. But synchronicity is not magic. It is the natural expression of archetypal patterns seeking resolution. The narcissist appears in your life because something within your own psyche is calling them forth. This is not mystical thinking. It is the recognition that we live in a participatory universe where consciousness and matter, inner and outer, are intimately connected. Consider the dreams that often precede encounters with narcissistic individuals. How many times have you awakened from a dream of being chased, of drowning, of being trapped in a house with no exits, only to meet someone days later who would create these very experiences in your waking life? The unconscious was preparing you, warning you, showing you the archetypal drama that was about to unfold. These dreams are not premonitions, but recognitions. They reveal that the pattern already exists within you, waiting for the right person to activate it. The narcissist you have not yet met is already constellated in your psyche, waiting in the wings of your unconscious theatre. When they appear in your life, it feels like fate, because, in a sense, it is. Not the fate of predestination, but the fate of unresolved psychological patterns seeking their completion. There is a particular quality to the initial encounter with a narcissist that those who have experienced it will recognize immediately. Time seems to slow, the world becomes more vivid, colors more saturated. You feel seen in a way you have never been seen before, understood in a way you have never been understood. This is not love at first sight, it is recognition at first sight. The narcissist sees your wound and knows instinctively how to present themselves as its healer. But what you are experiencing is not their authentic self meeting yours. What you are experiencing is your own projection meeting their mask. The narcissist, in their unconscious brilliance, becomes a blank screen onto which you project your deepest longings. They reflect back to you your own unlived potential, your own disowned power, your own capacity for the very confidence they seem to possess so effortlessly. This is why the beginning of a narcissistic relationship feels so intoxicating. You are not falling in love with another person. You are falling in love with aspects of yourself that you have projected onto them. The narcissist becomes the carrier of your own shadow. Not the dark shadow, but the golden shadow. The parts of yourself you have deemed too powerful, too radiant, too magnificent to own. In psychological terms, this is called the anima or animus projection. The narcissist becomes the embodiment of your soul's opposite, the missing piece that promises to make you whole. But this wholeness is an illusion, a trick of the unconscious that confuses projection with connection. You cannot become whole by merging with another. You can only become whole by reclaiming what you have projected. The narcissist, for their part, is equally caught in projection. They see in you not a person, but a function, the function of mirroring back to them their own grandiose self-image. They need you to see them as they wish to see themselves, to believe in their superiority, to confirm their specialness. This is why they are initially so attentive, so focused, so seemingly devoted. They are not loving you. They are loving the reflection of themselves they see in your eyes. This mutual projection creates what feels like instant intimacy, but is actually instant entanglement. Neither person is truly seeing the other. Both are seeing aspects of themselves reflected in the other. The relationship becomes a hall of mirrors, where authentic connection becomes impossible because neither person is present to their own truth, let alone the truth of the other. As the relationship progresses, the projections begin to fail. The narcissist cannot maintain their false self indefinitely, and you cannot continue to see them as the embodiment of your own disowned power. Reality begins to intrude on the fantasy, and this is when the dynamic shifts from idealization to devaluation. The narcissist begins to resent you for witnessing their human limitations, while you begin to feel confused and disappointed by their inability to be the god or goddess you made them in your mind. But here is what most people miss. The devaluation phase is not a departure from the pattern, but its deepest expression. The narcissist begins to attack in you the very qualities they once celebrated, because those qualities represent what they cannot accept in themselves. If they love-bombed your sensitivity, they will now call you too emotional. If they praised your intelligence, they will now dismiss your thoughts as worthless. If they adored your independence, they will now punish you for not being available enough. This is not random cruelty, it is the shadow asserting itself. The narcissist is unconsciously trying to destroy in you what they cannot integrate in themselves. They are projecting onto you their own self-hatred, their own feelings of inadequacy, their own terror of being ordinary. The more they diminish you, the more superior they can feel. The more they convince you that you are the problem, the more they can avoid facing their own wounds. And you, caught in your own projections, begin to believe them. You internalize their criticism because part of you has always believed it was true. The narcissist is not creating new wounds, they are reopening old ones. They are speaking to the part of you that has always felt not good enough, not worthy enough, not lovable enough. They are giving voice to your own inner critic, your own shadow, your own self-hatred. This is why their words cut so deep, why their rejection feels so devastating. They are not just rejecting you, they are confirming your worst fears about yourself. They are telling you that what you suspected all along is true. You are too much, too little, too broken, too needy, too whatever they need you to be in order to maintain their own fragile sense of superiority. The trauma bond that forms in this phase is not just emotional, but archetypal. You become locked in a dance with forces larger than both of you. The eternal drama of the wounded healer and the false king, the savior and the destroyer, the light bearer and the shadow dweller. These are not just personal roles but cosmic ones, played out in the theatre of your individual relationship, but connected to patterns that have existed since consciousness began. To break free from this pattern, you must first recognize that you are not just dealing with a difficult person, but with archetypal forces that have been activated in your psyche. The narcissist is not just someone with a personality disorder. They are a manifestation of the devouring parent, the false prophet, the wounded king or queen who rules through fear rather than love. They carry the shadow of legitimate authority, the corruption of true power, the distortion of authentic leadership, but you, in your attraction to them, are not just a victim of their manipulation. You are playing your own archetypal role, perhaps the eternal child seeking the perfect parent, the devoted servant hoping to be chosen by the master, the healer believing they can love the wounded back to wholeness. These are not personal failings, but universal patterns that exist within every human psyche, waiting for the right circumstances to be activated. The work of liberation begins when you can see these patterns clearly, when you can recognize the archetypal drama you have been unconsciously enacting. This requires a kind of double vision, the ability to see both the personal and the transpersonal, both the individual and the universal, both the psychological and the spiritual dimensions of your experience. When you can see the narcissist as both a person and an archetype, you begin to understand that your healing cannot depend on their change. Archetypes do not change. They are eternal patterns that express themselves through different individuals across time. The narcissist in your life may heal their wounds and transform their behavior, but the archetypal pattern of the devouring parent or false prophet will simply find another vessel through which to express itself. Your task is not to heal the archetype, but to free yourself from its grip. This requires what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold the tension between opposites until a new synthesis emerges. You must learn to hold both your genuine love for the narcissist and your clear recognition of their toxicity. You must embrace both your desire to help and your need to protect yourself. You must accept both your role in creating the dynamic and your right to choose something different. This is not the comfortable resolution of choosing sides, but the uncomfortable growth of holding complexity. It means refusing to see yourself as either pure victim or total perpetrator, refusing to see the narcissist as either complete monster or misunderstood saint. It means living in the tension of both and rather than the simplicity of either or. The narcissist will resist this complexity because it threatens their black and white worldview. They need you to be either all good or all bad, either devoted servant or ungrateful enemy. They cannot tolerate the nuanced truth that you can love them and still leave them, that you can understand their pain and still refuse to enable their dysfunction, that you can have compassion for their wounds and still protect yourself from their weapons. This is why the process of leaving a narcissistic relationship is so complex, so fraught with ambivalence and confusion. You are not just leaving a person, you are leaving an archetypal pattern that has organized your entire sense of self. You are not just ending a relationship, you are dissolving an identity that has been built around being the one who endures, who understands, who never gives up. The grief that accompanies this dissolution is not just personal, but collective. You are mourning not just the loss of this particular relationship, but the death of the archetypal role you have played throughout your life. You are grieving the fantasy of being the one who could love them into wholeness, the dream of being special enough to heal the unhealable, the hope of finally being chosen by the one who cannot choose. This grief is sacred and necessary. It marks the end of your unconscious participation in patterns that have governed your life since childhood. It signals the beginning of your journey toward authentic selfhood, toward relationships based on choice rather than compulsion, toward love that enhances rather than diminishes your essential nature. But the journey toward wholeness is not a straight line. The unconscious does not release its patterns easily, and the narcissist, whether the same person or a new one, will continue to appear in your life until you have fully integrated what they have come to teach. Each encounter offers you the opportunity to respond from a more conscious place, to choose differently, to break the cycle more completely. Sometimes this means recognizing the narcissistic pattern in its subtler forms. The spiritual teacher who claims to have transcended ego while demanding total devotion. The therapist who makes you feel crazy for questioning their methods. The friend who always needs to be the center of attention while claiming to be an empath. The archetypal pattern is endlessly creative in its manifestations, always adapting to your growing awareness, always finding new ways to hook your unconscious complexes. The work of consciousness is never complete, but it does get easier. With each encounter, you recognize the pattern more quickly, respond more skillfully, protect yourself more effectively. You begin to trust your own perceptions, to honor your own needs, to value your own truth. The narcissist's power to confuse and manipulate you diminishes as your own inner authority grows stronger. This is the paradox of the narcissistic encounter. It wounds you in order to heal you, breaks you in order to make you whole, enslaves you in order to set you free. The narcissist becomes the unwitting agent of your individuation, the unconscious catalyst for your awakening, the dark angel who guides you toward your own authentic power. But this transformation requires your conscious participation. You must choose to do the work, to face the shadows, to reclaim the projections. You must be willing to see your own narcissistic tendencies, to own your own capacity for manipulation, to acknowledge your own hunger for specialness. Only then can you break free from the cycle and create relationships based on genuine mutuality rather than unconscious compensation. The narcissist will continue to exist in the world, will continue to seek supply from those who are willing to provide it, but they will no longer be your teacher, your mirror, your tormentor. They will simply be another soul walking their own path, dealing with their own wounds, seeking their own healing in whatever way they can. You may encounter them in your life, but you will not be enchanted by them. You will see them clearly, perhaps with compassion, but without the old compulsion to save them from themselves. This is the gift that emerges from the ashes of narcissistic entanglement, the ability to love without losing yourself, to give without emptying yourself, to receive without owing yourself. You discover that you are not responsible for others' happiness, others' healing, others' choices. You are responsible only for your own integrity, your own growth, your own authentic expression. In this newfound freedom, you begin to attract different kinds of people, those who can meet you as an equal, who can love you without needing to possess you, who can support your growth without feeling threatened by your power. The magnetism that once drew narcissists to you now draws those who are capable of genuine intimacy, authentic connection, mutual respect. This is not the end of your journey, but the beginning of a new chapter, one written not from wound but from wisdom, not from need but from choice, not from fear but from love. The narcissist has served their purpose in your story. Now it is time to discover what comes next, to explore the vast territory of conscious relationship, to learn what it means to love and be loved from a place of wholeness rather than woundedness. The pattern that brought you together was not mistake but fate, not accident but archetypal necessity. You needed to learn what they had to teach, even if the teaching came wrapped in suffering. But now the lesson is complete. The pattern is conscious. The cycle is broken. You are free to write a new story, to create new patterns, to attract new experiences that will guide you toward even greater wholeness. The work of seeing through narcissistic patterns is not merely intellectual understanding, but a profound shift in the very fabric of your being. When you begin to recognize the archetypal forces at play, something fundamental changes in your energetic signature. The unconscious radar that once broadcast available for exploitation begins to emit a different frequency entirely. But this transformation does not happen overnight, nor does it unfold in linear fashion. The psyche resists change, even positive change, because the familiar patterns provide a sense of identity, however painful. You may find yourself mourning the loss of your old self, the one who believed that love required sacrifice, that worthiness had to be earned through suffering, that your value lay in your ability to endure the unendurable. There is a particular loneliness that accompanies this awakening, a sense of being between worlds. You no longer fit into the old patterns, but you have not yet fully embodied the new ones. The people who once felt like home now feel foreign, their dramas exhausting rather than engaging. The conversations that once seemed meaningful now ring hollow, their emotional intensity masking a fundamental emptiness. This is what Jung called the dark night of the soul, not a punishment but a necessary passage. You are being asked to release everything you thought you knew about love, about relationships, about yourself. The ego, which has organized itself around being the wounded healer, the eternal rescuer, the one who understands what others cannot, must die so that something truer can be born. But death is never comfortable, even when it is necessary. You may find yourself reaching for the old patterns, seeking out familiar forms of dysfunction, because they feel like home. The narcissist who once tormented you may suddenly seem appealing in their absence, their chaos preferable to the quiet uncertainty of your emerging self. This is not weakness. This is the natural resistance of the psyche to transformation. The unconscious mind operates according to its own mysterious logic, and it will test your commitment to change by presenting you with increasingly sophisticated versions of the same old trap. The narcissist may return, armed with new insights about their behavior, promises of change, explanations that almost make sense. They may speak the language of growth, of healing, of consciousness itself. But something deep within you will recognize the familiar energy beneath the new words. This is where discernment becomes crucial. Not the harsh judgment of the mind, but the subtle knowing of the body. You must learn to trust the wisdom of your nervous system, the intelligence of your intuition, the quiet voice that whispers truth beneath the noise of explanation and justification. The narcissist's words may sound different, but their energy remains the same: hungry, demanding, entitled. There is a dream that often comes to those who are learning to recognize these patterns. In the dream, they are offered a beautiful meal, perfectly prepared and elegantly presented. But as they lift the fork to their mouth, they notice something wrong. A strange smell, an off-taste, a subtle wrongness that their senses detect, even though their eyes see only beauty. This dream is the unconscious teaching you to trust your deeper knowing, to recognize poison even when it comes wrapped in pretty packages. The narcissist is not evil in the melodramatic sense of the word. They are wounded just as you are wounded. They are caught in patterns, just as you have been caught in patterns. But their woundedness expresses itself through consumption, through the endless hunger for validation that can never be satisfied. They are like vampires not because they choose to be, but because they know no other way to exist. Understanding this does not mean you must tolerate their behavior. Compassion does not require you to offer yourself as sacrifice. You can have empathy for their pain while refusing to be consumed by it. You can recognize their humanity while protecting your own. This is not cruelty. This is wisdom. The path of healing requires you to become exquisitely sensitive to the difference between authentic connection and energetic vampirism. Healthy relationships have a quality of reciprocity, of mutual nourishment, of natural give and take. There is space for both people to exist, to grow, to be themselves without constant performance or management. The energy between two whole people flows like a river. Sometimes faster, sometimes slower, but always moving, always alive. With the narcissist, the energy is different. It flows in only one direction, from you to them, leaving you depleted and them never satisfied. They are not truly present to you as a person, but only as a function, a source of supply, a mirror for their own reflection. When you speak, they are not listening to understand, but waiting for their turn to redirect the conversation back to themselves. This is why conversations with narcissists feel so exhausting. You are not engaging with another conscious being, but with a complex of needs and defenses that masquerades as a person. They cannot truly see you because they are too busy managing their own internal chaos, too busy maintaining their false self, too busy scanning for threats to their fragile self-image. But recognizing this pattern is not enough. You must also examine your own participation in it. What is it in you that finds this one-sided dynamic familiar? What wound in your own psyche resonates with their emptiness? What part of you believes that love means giving until you have nothing left? These questions will lead you into the deeper archaeology of your own soul. You will discover that your attraction to narcissists is not random but purposeful, not accidental but archetypal. You will find that somewhere in your history, perhaps in childhood, perhaps in the genetic memory of your ancestors, you learned that love was dangerous, that closeness meant engulfment, that to be valued you must be useful. The child who grows up in a narcissistic family system learns a terrible alchemy. They discover that by managing the emotions of others, they can sometimes feel safe. They become hypervigilant to the moods and needs of those around them, developing an almost supernatural ability to read the emotional atmosphere. This hypervigilance becomes their superpower and their curse. In adulthood, this same hypervigilance draws them to narcissists like a magnet. They can sense the wounded child beneath the grandiose exterior, the terror behind the rage, the emptiness behind the entitlement. They believe they can heal what they can see, that their understanding can transform the other person's pain. But this is not healing. This is codependence dressed up as compassion. The narcissist, for their part, recognizes this energy immediately. They have an uncanny ability to identify those who will absorb their projections, who will take responsibility for their emotional regulation, who will provide the endless supply of validation they crave. They do not consciously seek out empaths, but they are unconsciously drawn to them like moths to flame. This creates what I call the shadow dance, a complex choreography of projection and absorption, of giving and taking, of wounds seeking their completion in other wounds. Both partners are unconscious participants in this dance, each playing their role with the precision of actors who have rehearsed their parts for lifetimes. The empath provides the narcissist with the mirroring they need to maintain their full self, while the narcissist provides the empath with the familiar chaos that feels like home. The empath gets to be the hero, the one who understands, the one who stays when others leave. The narcissist gets to be the center of attention, the one who is special, the one who is worth sacrificing for. But this dance is not sustainable. The empath eventually becomes depleted, while the narcissist becomes increasingly demanding. The very love that the empath offers becomes a source of resentment for the narcissist, who cannot tolerate being truly seen in their vulnerability. The empath's compassion becomes a mirror that reflects back the narcissist's own self-hatred, triggering their rage and their need to destroy the witness to their shame. This is why narcissistic relationships follow such predictable patterns: idealization, devaluation, discard, and hoovering. These are not conscious strategies but unconscious expressions of the narcissist's internal war between their need for connection and their terror of being truly known. They draw you close when they need supply, push you away when you get too close to their truth, discard you when you become too much of a threat to their false self, and hoover you back when their supply runs low. Understanding these patterns intellectually is one thing. Breaking free from them emotionally is another. The trauma bond that forms in narcissistic relationships is not just psychological but neurological. Your nervous system becomes addicted to the chaos, the intensity, the intermittent reinforcement of love and withdrawal. Your brain begins to interpret stability as boredom, peace as emptiness, healthy love as lack of passion. This is why leaving a narcissistic relationship is so difficult, why you may find yourself returning again and again despite knowing better. You are not weak or stupid. You are dealing with a complex form of psychological conditioning that has literally rewired your nervous system. Breaking free requires not just intellectual understanding, but somatic healing, not just cognitive awareness, but bodily transformation. The work of healing begins in the body, with learning to feel your own feelings without immediately rushing to fix someone else's. It begins with learning to sit with discomfort without seeking drama to distract from it. It begins with learning to be alone with yourself without immediately seeking someone to fill the space. This is perhaps the most challenging part of the journey, because it requires you to face the very emptiness that the narcissistic relationship was designed to avoid. You must learn to befriend your own solitude, to find meaning in your own company, to discover who you are when you are not in reaction to someone else's dysfunction. In this space of aloneness, you begin to hear the voice of your own authentic self, not the self that has been shaped by trauma and conditioning, but the self that exists beneath all the adaptive strategies and survival mechanisms. This voice is often quiet at first, drowned out by the louder voices of fear and conditioning. But as you learn to listen, it grows stronger, more clear, more insistent. This authentic voice will guide you toward relationships that nourish rather than drain you, toward people who can meet you as an equal rather than as a source of supply. It will help you recognize the difference between genuine attraction and trauma bonding, between healthy passion and addictive intensity, between love that liberates and love that enslaves. But first, you must learn to trust this voice above all others. You must learn to value your own perceptions even when they contradict what others tell you. You must learn to honor your own needs even when others call you selfish. You must learn to protect your own energy even when others accuse you of being cold. This is not easy work, especially for those who have been trained to prioritize others' needs above their own. You will be called selfish, cold, unloving by those who benefited from your self-sacrifice. You will be accused of changing, of becoming someone you're not, of abandoning those who need you. These accusations will trigger your deepest fears about yourself, your oldest wounds about your worthiness. But you must remember that these accusations are not truth, but projection. They are the voices of those who have a vested interest in keeping you small, keeping you available, keeping you focused on their needs rather than your own. They are the voices of a world that has taught you to be a giver rather than a receiver, a helper rather than a person, a resource rather than a soul. The narcissist in your life will be particularly skilled at triggering these fears. They will remind you of all the times you failed them, all the ways you disappointed them, all the reasons you should be grateful for their attention. They will paint themselves as the victim of your newfound boundaries, as the innocent recipient of your sudden cruelty. They will make you feel guilty for protecting yourself, selfish for honoring your needs, cruel for refusing to sacrifice yourself on the altar of their comfort. This is their last desperate attempt to maintain control, to keep you trapped in the old patterns. They are not consciously manipulating you. They genuinely believe their own narrative, genuinely experience your self-care as abandonment, genuinely feel victimized by your refusal to continue enabling their dysfunction. But their genuine belief does not make their perspective true. You must learn to hold your own truth even when it is challenged, even when it is questioned, even when it is attacked. You must learn to trust your own experience even when others tell you it is wrong, invalid, or selfish. You must learn to stand in your own power even when others try to convince you that you are powerless. This is the work of individuation, not the selfish pursuit of personal desires, but the sacred responsibility of becoming who you truly are. It is the process of differentiating yourself from the collective, of claiming your own authority, of taking responsibility for your own life. It is the journey from unconscious participation in archetypal patterns to conscious choice about how you engage with the world. The narcissist cannot make this journey themselves. They are too terrified of facing their own emptiness, too invested in maintaining their false self, too addicted to the external validation that keeps their inner world from collapsing. But you can make this journey, and in making it, you free not only yourself, but also everyone who comes into contact with your authentic presence. When you stop playing the role of the wounded healer, you free others from the role of the patient. When you stop being the eternal rescuer, you allow others to discover their own strength. When you stop absorbing everyone else's emotions, you give them the gift of having to feel their own feelings. This is not cruelty. This is the highest form of love. The world needs people who have done this work, who have faced their own shadows and emerged whole. It needs people who can love without losing themselves, who can give without emptying themselves, who can be present without being consumed. It needs people who have learned to say no with love, to set boundaries with compassion, to protect their energy without closing their hearts. You are being called to become such a person. The narcissist in your life, in their unconscious wisdom, has been pushing you toward this transformation all along. They have been your dark teacher, your shadow guide, your unwitting catalyst for awakening. They have shown you what happens when the ego runs unchecked, when the false self becomes the only self, when the need for validation becomes the organizing principle of a life. Now it is time to choose a different path. Not the path of reaction, but the path of creation. Not the path of wound, but the path of wisdom. Not the path of unconscious repetition, but the path of conscious choice. The narcissist has served their purpose in your story. Now it is time to discover what comes next. The path forward is not a gentle slope, but a steep ascent through the terrain of your own unconscious. You will find yourself tested at every turn, not by external forces, but by the very patterns you seek to transcend. The narcissist may have exited your life, but the archetypal energy they carried will continue to manifest in subtler forms, appearing in the colleague who needs constant validation, the friend who makes every conversation about themselves, the family member who cannot tolerate your growing boundaries. These encounters are not setbacks, but opportunities for integration. Each time you recognize the pattern without being pulled into it, you strengthen your capacity for conscious choice. Each time you maintain your center in the presence of someone else's chaos, you deepen your connection to your authentic self. Each time you refuse to sacrifice your truth for someone else's comfort, you break the ancient spell that has governed your relationships. But beware the seductive voice of spiritual bypassing that whispers you should simply forgive and forget, that holding boundaries is unspiritual, that true love requires endless tolerance. This voice is not wisdom but wounding dressed in holy clothing. It is the internalized voice of those who benefited from your self-abandonment, now masquerading as higher consciousness. True forgiveness does not require you to forget the lessons you have learned. True compassion does not demand you offer yourself as sacrifice. True love does not ask you to betray your own soul for another's comfort. These are distortions of genuine spiritual principles, shadows of authentic wisdom that keep you trapped in patterns of self-destruction. The narcissist taught you about power through its absence in your relationship with them. They wielded influence through manipulation, control through chaos, authority through intimidation. But true power is different entirely. It flows from alignment with your deepest truth, from the courage to be who you are regardless of others' approval, from the willingness to stand alone if necessary, rather than compromise your integrity. This power cannot be taken from you because it does not depend on external validation. It cannot be diminished by others' opinions because it is rooted in your own knowing. It cannot be destroyed by conflict because it thrives on truth rather than harmony. This is the power that the narcissist both fears and craves, the power they tried to steal from you because they could not generate it themselves. As you reclaim this power, you will find that your very presence becomes a catalyst for others' transformation. Not through preaching or teaching, but through simple embodiment of your authentic self. People will be drawn to your clarity, your groundedness, your refusal to participate in drama. They will be both attracted to and threatened by your capacity to remain whole in the face of others' fragmentation. Some will try to pull you back into the old patterns to convince you that you have become cold, unfeeling, selfish. They will miss the version of you that absorbed their emotions, that took responsibility for their happiness, that made them feel better about themselves through your willingness to feel worse. These are not the people you are meant to serve anymore. Others will recognize something in you that they long to cultivate in themselves. They will ask how you learned to say no without guilt, how you developed the capacity to love without losing yourself, how you found the strength to walk away from what was destroying you. These are the conversations that matter, the connections that heal, the relationships that transform. The narcissist showed you what happens when someone becomes completely identified with their false self, when the mask becomes so rigid that the person disappears entirely. They demonstrated the ultimate futility of seeking worth through external means, of trying to fill an internal void through external supply. They revealed the bankruptcy of a life organized around image rather than substance, performance rather than presence. But they also showed you your own capacity for self-deception, your own attachment to being needed, your own fear of being ordinary. They mirrored back to you the parts of yourself that you had disowned, the shadow aspects of your own psyche that you had projected onto others. In this way, they served as unwitting agents of your own self-knowledge, dark mirrors reflecting back the truth you needed to see. The integration of these shadow aspects is not comfortable work. It requires you to acknowledge that you too have narcissistic tendencies, that you too have manipulated others through your pain, that you too have used your sensitivity as a weapon when it served your purposes. This is not self-condemnation, but self-completion, not punishment, but wholeness. When you can own these aspects of yourself without shame, when you can acknowledge your own capacity for selfishness without being destroyed by it, when you can recognize your own hunger for specialness without being controlled by it, you become truly free. Free to choose your responses rather than react from your wounds. Free to love from fullness rather than emptiness. Free to give from choice rather than compulsion. The narcissist will continue to exist in the world, will continue to play their role in others' psychological dramas, will continue to serve as teacher and tormentor for those who still need to learn what they have to offer. But they will no longer be your teacher, your mirror, your catalyst for growth. You have graduated from their classroom, learned their lessons, integrated their gifts. Now you stand at the threshold of a new kind of relationship, not the unconscious dance of complementary wounds, but the conscious choice of two whole people who enhance rather than complete each other. This is foreign territory for someone who has known only the intensity of trauma bonding, the familiar chaos of narcissistic love, the addictive quality of intermittent reinforcement. Healthy love feels different. It lacks the desperate urgency of trying to heal someone who cannot be healed, the adrenaline rush of walking on eggshells, the intoxicating feeling of being chosen by someone who usually chooses no one. Instead, it offers something more subtle but infinitely more nourishing. The steady presence of someone who sees you clearly and chooses to stay. The quiet joy of being accepted without having to perform. The deep peace of being with someone who requires nothing from you but your authentic presence. This kind of love requires a different set of skills than those you developed in narcissistic relationships. Instead of hypervigilance, it asks for presence. Instead of management, it requires trust. Instead of sacrifice, it invites reciprocity. Instead of intensity, it offers intimacy. These are foreign concepts to someone whose nervous system has been trained to interpret chaos as connection, drama as depth, pain as passion. You must learn to find excitement in stability, to discover passion in peace, to experience intensity in the simple act of being truly seen and accepted. This is not settling for less, but opening to more genuine connection, more authentic intimacy, more real love than you have ever known. The narcissist prepared you for this transformation through their very inability to provide it. They showed you what love is not, so that you could recognize what love is. They demonstrated the futility of trying to earn affection through performance, so that you could discover the grace of being loved for who you are. They revealed the emptiness of relationships based on need, so that you could appreciate the fullness of connections based on choice. In this way, even the narcissist becomes a teacher of love, though not in the way they intended. They become the darkness that makes you appreciate the light, the chaos that makes you value peace, the emptiness that makes you treasure fullness. They become the unwitting servants of your awakening, the unconscious agents of your transformation, the dark angels who guide you toward your own redemption. This is the final gift of the narcissistic encounter, the recognition that every experience, no matter how painful, serves the deeper purpose of your soul's evolution. The narcissist was not a mistake in your story, but a necessary character, not an accident, but an appointment, not a curse, but a catalyst disguised as catastrophe. You attracted them because you needed to learn what they had to teach. You endured their treatment because you needed to discover your own strength. You survived their abandonment because you needed to find your own worth. You escaped their control because you needed to reclaim your own power. Every moment of suffering served the greater purpose of your awakening. Now, as you stand free from their influence, you carry within you the wisdom that can only come from having journeyed through the underworld and returned to tell the tale. You know the difference between love and addiction, between connection and entanglement, between intimacy and enmeshment. You understand the subtle signs of emotional manipulation, the red flags of narcissistic behavior, the early warning signals of unhealthy dynamics. But more importantly, you know yourself. You know your own worth, your own power, your own capacity for love. You know that you are not too much or too little, not too sensitive or too demanding, not too broken or too needy. You know that you are exactly as you are meant to be, that your sensitivity is a gift rather than a curse, that your capacity for deep feeling is a strength rather than a weakness. The narcissist tried to convince you otherwise, tried to make you doubt your own perceptions, your own reality, your own worth, but their attempts at diminishment only served to reveal your true magnitude. Their efforts to control you only demonstrated your inherent freedom. Their need to possess you only highlighted your natural sovereignty. You are not the empty vessel they tried to make you, not the broken thing they claimed you were, not the worthless person they attempted to convince you that you are. You are a whole human being with your own dreams, your own desires, your own destiny. You are a soul with your own purpose, your own path, your own power. You are a person worthy of love, respect, and genuine connection. The narcissist's inability to provide these things was not a reflection of your unworthiness, but of their incapacity. Their failure to see your value was not evidence of your lack of worth, but of their blindness. Their inability to love you properly was not proof of your unlovability, but of their own woundedness. You are free now to seek out those who can see you clearly, who can love you fully, who can meet you where you are without needing you to be someone else. You are free to choose relationships that nourish rather than drain you, that celebrate rather than diminish you, that enhance rather than exploit you. You are free to be yourself fully and completely, without apology or explanation. This is the ultimate victory over the narcissistic pattern. Not the defeat of the narcissist, but the reclaiming of yourself. Not the changing of them, but the transformation of you. Not the healing of their wounds, but the integration of your own wholeness. You have broken the cycle, not just for yourself, but for all who will benefit from your example, your wisdom, your transformed presence in the world. The narcissist, in their unconscious wisdom, has served their purpose in your story. They have been your dark teacher, your shadow guide, your unwitting catalyst for awakening. They have shown you what you do not want so that you can choose what you do want. They have demonstrated what love is not so that you can recognize what love is. They have revealed your own capacity for self-betrayal so that you can choose self-loyalty. Now it is time to close this chapter and begin the next. The narcissist has taught you everything they have to teach. The pattern has been made conscious, the lesson has been learned, the transformation has been achieved. You are no longer the person who entered that relationship, no longer the soul who believed that love required sacrifice, no longer the being who thought that worth had to be earned through suffering. You are someone new, someone whole, someone free. You are the author of your own story now, the creator of your own destiny, the architect of your own relationships. You have the power to choose who enters your life and who remains, who receives your energy and who does not, who earns your trust and who proves unworthy of it. Use this power wisely. Honor the lessons you have learned. Trust the wisdom you have gained. Cherish the freedom you have won. And remember always that you are worthy of love, deserving of respect, and capable of creating the relationships you truly desire. The narcissist's chapter in your story is over. Now it is time to write the next one, with consciousness, with intention, and with the full knowledge of your own magnificent worth.